Rosa Parks' singular act of disobedience launched a movement. With the simplest of gestures, she helped change America and change the world.
This statue speaks for itself, and today we speak for a nation committed to remembering and, more importantly, emulating Rosa Parks. It brings to mind Lady Liberty herself, the promise of America clear for all to see.
A rare bipartisan moment in the Capitol this week, the unveiling of the Rosa Parks statue. We're going to talk about all the week's politics now on our roundtable. I'm joined by ABC's Cokie Roberts, the Republican mayor of Saratoga Springs, Utah, Mia Love. Thanks for coming in this morning. Matthew Dowd from ABC as well. Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal, and James Carville, Democratic strategist. There's too many candidates to name at this point. And I can safely say that none of you ever thought you'd be following Dennis Rodman on a roundtable.
And we've never seen anybody dressed like that in the studio either.
Maybe the last time. But let's talk about what happened this week in Washington. You know, Cokie, it's when this sequester, the across-the-board spending cuts, was devised, it was supposed to pack such a powerful punch it would never happen. It seemed to be accepted this week with an air of resignation.
And more of a whimper than a bang. And I think that's something of a problem for the president, which he indicated in his press conference, where he said it's not going to be Armageddon. Well, up until then, it was Armageddon, and the administration saying, you know, terrible things are going to happen, and children won't be in school, and Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, saying teachers are getting pink slips, which the Washington Post says is just a straight lie, 4 Pinocchios on the lie test. So, you know, they really oversold it, I think, and now we're going to have to see how people
oversold or
respond.
Premature?
Well, first thing is, I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to give Mitt Romney and Republicans some credit. They told the truth in the last election. They said if you re-elect Obama, we're going to have European-style policies in the United States. And that's just what we're getting. European-style austerity, the thing that has brought Britain to its knees 3 times, the thing that has brought Spain and Italy both to its knees. We are copying the very policies that are failing. Now, is it Armageddon? Macroeconomic advisors, Goldman Sachs, say 0.5 point off of GDP. I don't know if that's Armageddon, but that's a lot when you have tepid GDP. 750,000 jobs lost. If you're one of those 750,000 people, that's Armageddon.
Were those the same economists who said that if you spend $830 billion on the stimulus, you'll get unemployment down below 6%? I think those are the same. Yeah, that's the same economists.
But how about the point that even, you know, Republicans have looked at to say what might have been smarter is to lock in long-term deficit reduction, but don't take money out of the economy.
Oh, sure. Well, I leave aside the economic argument. Everybody knows that most of the spending that you have to fix is in the entitlement section. There's no question about it. This is not a smart way to do it. On the other hand, it at least shows that we can cut some spending. It's at least some spending that the president actually has been saying he supports, right? This is part of his $2.5 trillion in spending cuts. So this is something that I think the president could make it less onerous if he would say, I'll take the flexibility the Republicans are offering him. He could do that, but he's insisting on using this as a club to get them to agree to another tax increase.
And he thought it would work.
But to me, this is really not about this. This is about a leadership problem. This is a huge leadership problem, I think, on both sides of the aisle. And I think both sides are completely unwilling to tell the American public the truth. I think the Democrats are unwilling to actually tell the American public that we cannot fix this unless we deal with entitlements in a real substantive way. And Republicans unwilling to be truthful to the American public.
Hasn't the president been willing to do that in his negotiations with Speaker?
I think the president speaks loudly, and then he says these things, and then never does anything. He never has a meeting. He shows up, he calls a meeting 2 hours before the sequester is about to expire. I don't think the president's actually reached out and tried to do this, but I also don't think they've been receptive from the Republicans either. Republicans are unwilling to say there's waste in the defense budget, and we need to make cuts there.
You're actually going to implement budgets on the ground, and I want you to weigh in, but also, do you sense you're going to feel this in your town?
No. We're not going to feel this at all. This is why I advocate for being independent and not being so subjective to federal funding or not being dependent on federal funding. We're going to be absolutely fine. We do not, our budgets aren't based on how much money comes in from federal government. So as a city, we're going to be fine. I think that you're going to find most states and most cities that are self-sufficient are going to do fine. One of the things that I think is really important here is I think that this is not about a right-left issue because they're the ones that both sides got us into this mess. This is a showdown between Washington and the American people and watching this ping-pong game.
That's a really good point. I mean, where I live in the Washington suburbs, people will be affected. But the fact is that people they see these two men going out after each other and basically say, fix it, just fix it. Stop doing these Washington games.
I'm sorry, but I just saw Senator Ayalt, am I pronouncing her name correctly, said this is having a very adverse effect on the United States military. This is a Republican senator from New Hampshire. You're delaying ship maintenance. You're cutting training missions down. You're doing all of these things. And the idea, yes, if you don't do ship maintenance this year and you do it next year, when do you start feeling it? You start feeling it at some point. She wants to change it. She's saying the same thing Senator McCain is saying. Again, we don't have a half a point of GDP to lose. And the same people are saying this is not going to hurt, and the same people that said there were weapons of mass destruction, that it would be a cakewalk, that housing couldn't bring the economy down, that interest rates were going up, that inflation was around the corner.
I think the problem is that somebody needs to tell the American public in a broad way there is going to be pain. If we care about the budget, if we care about the fiscal mess, either we have to make substantial cuts or we have to raise taxes on the middle class. You can't do it without either one of those.
What I would say is this. There is pain out there. The middle class is in pain. Incomes are down. The idea that there's no pain in this country, there's been pain in this country for a long time.
And a tax increase is not going to help the economy. We just had 2 months ago the biggest tax increase in 20 years. This is the problem. The president is insisting that Republicans raise taxes. And that is not, they can't do that politically, and they're not going to do it. We're going to have a stalemate until he takes it off the table.
I think you're right that the stalemate is going to be in place, but is the White House correct that over time, and it clearly hasn't happened yet, but over time the pressure is going to build because these cuts are going to start to kick in?
There will be some pressure built up, and in certain sections of the economy, certainly where the government has expanded the most, certainly in some parts of the country where defense matters. There will. There's no question this is not the most intelligent way to do it, but I don't think it's Armageddon. The president oversold it, as Koki suggested, and now he's got a credibility problem that is going to hurt him for the next few months.
The credibility problem doesn't stop there. Yes, there is pain. There's a lot of pain. I see it out there. I mean, I've got family members that live in inner cities, and I can tell you right now that this president's doing nothing to eliminate those pains.
But you know, you both talk about the credibility problem, but Koki Roberts, our own polling shows that right now, at least, the president's approval ratings on handling spending, on handling this issue, far outpace the Republicans.
Absolutely. Our polling shows it, and so does everybody else's. So he's got the strong hand here, and he's obviously using it. What was somewhat encouraging in Senator Ayalt's interview was the idea of coming to the grand bargain, because that
I
is
heard
the
an opening
only,
there as well.
It's the only way you can do it. The president did say in his press conference the other day that the big problem in spending was health care. Now, we all know that, but for him to say it counts. And so if he said, I'm willing to take on my own party on these entitlement issues. If that's true, and then the Republicans are willing to take on their own party on taxes,
there's just no winners in this. I mean, there's no winners. There's somebody that loses less. If you look at the polling, the president loses less, but he doesn't win in this.
Everybody owns the economy.
Everybody gets mud on him. I think the interesting thing to pay attention to is the markets, which is a telling sign, which is the markets have not changed. They continue to rise. What they basically decided is dysfunction in Washington and inability to do anything is now standard. And so, therefore, we're going to discount everything out of Washington.
Well, not only standard, but maybe it's being done in the wrong way. But the amount of deficit reduction that most economists said is about what we should do over the next 10 years, about $4 trillion, is actually happening.
Right. And we've had 3 years of deficit percent of GDP, the best 3 years we've had since World War II. We've had the best 3 years on leveling of health care costs that we've had in the last 40 years. I mean, there are things that are happening out there. The last thing that we need right now is some kind of austerity. This economy is nowhere near where it is. We're going to do what they did in Britain.
James,
we're doing what they're doing in the Spaniards.
2.4% out of a $4 trillion budget.
This is a joke. Because why did Senator Ayalt say it's hurting the military? Why is it hurting?
Because this is a dogma the Republicans pay. They were unwilling to say the military has waste in it. It's unwilling to be cut. The military should be cut.
Well, again, it's not going in a smart way.
Training missions and maintenance, that's not smart.
I want to move on to another issue. We had a big development this week on gay marriage. Supreme Court is going to hear the case on Proposition 8 outlawing gay marriage in California. The president and the administration weighed in.
What we've said is that same-sex couples are a group, a class that deserves heightened scrutiny, that the Supreme Court needs to ask the state why it's doing it, and if the state doesn't have a good reason, it should be struck down. If I were on the court, that'd probably be the view that I'd put forward. But I'm not a judge, I'm the president.
Now, the brief didn't go quite that far. The the president's team did not argue that marriage is a federally guaranteed right for gays and lesbians. But Paul Shugo, one of the other big developments this week, you also saw top Republicans, dozens of top Republicans weighing in with a friend of the court brief, and corporate America stepping up in a big way as well in support of gay marriage.
Not elected officials yet, but these are Republicans. I think what you're seeing is that on gay marriage, this used to be an issue even until up to a year ago. The president was against gay marriage that divided Democrats. And now you're seeing, I think, after the results of this last election, where young people really moved to the Democrats substantially, in part on some of these cultural issues. You're going to see this issue begin to divide Republicans more. And I think that depending on what the court does, you're going to see more Republicans, I think, instead of saying, as some did, we need a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage, they're going to start to say, well, let's have the states decide this.
So are you saying perhaps some Republicans may want the court to get them off the hook?
Well, I don't think they want the court to basically say that the gay marriage is a constitutional right. I think they might be happy if the court said, you know what, the Defense of Marriage Act, signed by Bill Clinton, is unconstitutional because it imposes a federal solution on the states, and just let New York do what it wants to do.
Is that good enough for you?
Yeah, I think that the federal government has its hands full with the fiscal issues, and so either way, I tend to take it at a different angle at this. I know what I believe in my home, and I certainly don't want the federal government defining anything for me. I think that we should I take the approach that we should leave it to the states.
The march of history is already moving, and Republicans know if they stand in the way on this. This is just like civil rights, women's rights. We're now at the point. This is an amazing, I think, thing that's happened in a short time period. It used to be, if you were talking about social issues like this, you were losing as a Democrat if you're talking about. Now, if you're talking about social issues like this, you're losing as a Republican. And history is now moving. This issue is done. Republicans have to come face to face with the idea that this issue is over.
I must say, it is mind-boggling how fast it moved. And public opinion really turned very, very quickly on this. And you really have to give credit to very courageous people in the gay community who came forward and said, look, you're talking about me. I'm your brother. I'm your friend. I'm your sister. And it really did change voices. And young people are essential here.
Our colleague last November said it best, George Will. Opposition to this thing is literally dying off. Every month we got
but George always says that for young people, being gay is about as interesting as being left-handed.
Exactly. Only one issue, though, that's dividing Republicans right now. You saw this week the CPAC, Conservative Political Action Committee Conference, did not invite Chris Christie, one of the Republican leaders in the country right now, governor of New Jersey. Here was his response.
They don't want to invite me. That's their call. It's their organization. It's their business. And they get to decide who they want to have come and not come. It's not like I'm lacking for invitations to speak, both here and around the country.
And he's loving his 74% approval rating right now. But, James, this is only one manifestation of it. You've also got Karl Rove Group on the one hand trying to support candidates who defend them against primary challenges from Tea Party candidates. And you've got the Club for Growth targeting what they call Republicans in name only.
Yeah, Matthew and I, this is in the green room, we've lost elections before, Democrats have, Republicans have before. I think this one is somehow or another has been particularly hard for the Republicans. And they're like really mad at each other right now in to me, an amusing way, but if I were a Republican, in an almost unhealthy way. I mean, they're really lashing out at each other and blaming back and forth, and every day. So the Club for Growth story was kind of my idea for a significant story, that they're really going after, they're naming the people they're going after right now, which of course is going to have a chilling effect on other Republicans who think that they may be up.
Any way to stop this, Paul, as you go?
I would welcome it. I think we need a big debate. If I were CPAC, I would have invited Christie and let him say what he wanted on guns or anything else, and if you disagreed with it, boo him or what have you. But this is the time Republican Party needs to have a debate, and a pretty raucous debate. And I disagree with James. I don't think it's any meaner than the Democrats I remember after 1988, and they lost the third election in a row. So, the Republicans need to have this out. They need to sort it out. They need to debate. Don't blackball any candidates or any Republicans. Come on in. Let's mix it up.
CPAC, to me, it totally diminishes their credibility as an organization when you basically, Chris Christie is a national leader, and their explanation about why, and the next day about why
didn't have a good year.
It's like an all-star game. They say he didn't have a good year. And they invite Sarah Palin, who wasn't competent enough to keep a Fox News contract, but she's invited to a CPAC meeting. I mean, to me, they basically, many people, Carl and many people, decided that the voters out there don't know what they're doing. That the voters who like Chris Christie and the voters that like other candidates, like they're really mixed up, and we're going to tell them what the truth is. And whenever that's a strategy on either side, when you're trying to tell the voters they're wrong, it's a bad move.
You're going to stand up for CPAC here?
I'm going to say, this is probably where the debate comes in a little bit. I am going to say this. CPAC is an independent, they're their organization. They can go in and ask whoever they want to. I'm sure Chris Christie is not hurting for speaking events. I mean, I've listened to the man. I've met the man. I think he's a great leader. But he's also going to be loyal to New Jersey and follow the things that New Jersey wants him to follow. And that might not fall in line with what CPAC wants. I know that I'm loyal to the state. Does the Republican
Party have to expand its reach in the Northeast in order to be credible in a national election?
Look, I think we need to have a debate. I don't like the fact that Republicans are eating each other. If you think about this, Democrats tend to stick together based on one issue, and we tend to divide based on many different issues. And so we have to have a debate, and a healthy debate is good. And we have to know that we're not going to agree on everything.
Yeah, but Mia, for Republicans to have lost Senate seats in the last election was political malpractice. Everything was in place for them to gain Senate seats. And the reason they lost Senate seats was because of their candidates. And the reason the candidates were a problem is they were too out there for a statewide election.
That's only that's true in some places. You're right in Missouri, but it wasn't true in North Dakota and Montana, where they had mainstream candidates who were just bad candidates.
Right.
Any day that you have more Sarah Palin and less Chris Christie is a good day for James Garfield. Let me just put it that way. I'm all for it. They have the right to do what they want. But me, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the little gathering up there in Washington.
I want to move on. The other big story this week, we all saw it in Rome, was fortunate enough to be in Rome to watch Pope Benedict retire. Koki, you were there with me as well. Remarkable pageantry in his final hours. But it does now come at a time after this remarkably bold move in retiring, where the Catholic Church is going to have to make a lot of big decisions going forward.
And they're at sea. It was striking to me when you and I were talking with Cardinal Wuerl of Washington, how little they know about what they're going to do next, and how, they know formally that they're going to go into a meeting and then they're going to talk.
Because everything here is new. There hasn't been a resignation in 600 years.
And they also, more than half of them have never been in a conclave where you elect a pope. And there's no front runner. With the last election, we all knew Joseph Ratzinger, and so did they. But there's nobody like that now. And with the scandals that are there, the first thing they have to do is make absolutely sure in every way that whomever they pick is spotless.
Big background
And they
check.
don't know how to do that. They don't know how to, what are they going to do? Call the head of the Knights of Columbus? They don't know how to do it.
To me, this is like one of the most crucial moments in the church's history right now. If you look at what's happened, this huge scandal with pedophiles in the church that has gone through every diocese in the country, and you're stacked here with Catholics. I'm Catholic. I was an altar boy. I went to Catholic University, all of that. I think we're at that moment in time where they have to make a decision, actually similar to the Republican Party in the same exact thing. They could either retrench and become a minority institution, or they can expand. Youth are leaving the church. Minorities in the developed world are leaving the church. There's no role. Women don't feel a real role in the church in this time, and it's dominated by mostly older white men.
That led our friend E.J. Dion to say a fanciful kind of proposal they should pick a nun for pope.
But I think they actually need to go back to a church of the heart as opposed to a church of the head, and that's a problem.
I'm cradle Catholic. I pull for the church. But I don't deny the problems they have. I'm just praying that if the Holy Spirit ever does intervene, that he comes now and we see the name, or she. My daughter will correct me also. And we go, wow, we got this guy's really a humble, neat guy that people can look up to and can make some of the necessary changes. They're not going to change doctrine, but they can certainly change what they emphasize. I'm just hoping and praying that we get a good.
I think it's great, actually. That here's a pope that holds a very big position in the Catholic Church. It's saying, I'm unhealthy. I can no longer do this any longer, and actually says, I'm going to step down. I'm going to be really interested in seeing what happens with conclave. Everything I know, I learned from Dan Brown.
I think that's their fear.
I can't get enough of it. I just read everything about it. I just think it's awesome.
One of the things, Paul, as you go, is it is fascinating. Now, for the first time, you're actually hearing some American names being talked about as Pope. Cardinal Timothy Dolan here in New York, Sean O'Malley from Boston. But historically, there has been a real reluctance to have an American because of the association with a superpower.
Right. The America is so strong. Otherwise, why have a pope, religious leader, also an American? Although Timothy Dolan is a great leader and very charismatic. Those of us who know him would be thrilled, frankly, to see him as pope. But I think it's unlikely. I think what would be most exciting, even to Catholics in the Western world, is to get a pope from the developing world, where the church is growing.
Where the Catholics are.
Asia. That's where it's most exciting. One of the biggest growth opportunities for the Catholic Church is in China, which persecutes the church. And you have to have the next pope, in addition to that kind of pastoral role, you have to have somebody who can clean out that bureaucracy in the Vatican.
And they're going to have to open the windows.
Which is undermine
and stop being so secretive, and that's a huge part of the problem.
I'm not sure that's going to happen, though. I think that...
Well, then it's a church that you question whether or not it's imbued with the Holy Spirit. If they don't think they have to keep the doors shut and everything can go in the dark...
There are a lot of reports that the Pope has turned over the dossier on all the corruption scandals inside the Vatican, that only the cardinals are going to be able to see that, but it certainly sounds as if it's explosive information.
Of course they have problems over there. How explosive it is, the answer is probably very. I would be surprised if it's anything else. But I think what people want, they want a humble guy, you know, who can like straighten out make the Vatican not a place of intrigue, but a place that people can look up to. And this guy from the Philippines, what about him? He was
young man.
The young guy, very humble.
The idea of the Vatican not being a place of intrigue is like saying a political party is not.
I think there was some feeling over there, talking to a lot of cardinals, that the boldness of Pope Benedict's move in resigning and doing something that hadn't been done in 600 years might inspire them to make a bold move as well.
But they differ on what that is, of course, and of course they have different constituencies, just as you were talking about in this country. You know, there are different issues facing them. So in Africa, the AIDS crisis has been something that the church has had to deal with enormously. And in other parts of the world, in Europe, it's the rise of Islam and the defection of young people. I mean, all over the world there are different issues, and so each one of these cardinals comes in with a different set of criteria of what.
The biggest problem is this. And they all know this. If they go the wrong way, they're going to become irrelevant. And that's the one thing that they can't take. And they have to change. They're still relevant, but they need to be more relevant. They're losing their authority as all of these things that Matthew talked about keep eroding. And for the church to regain its authority, we need a pope that the world can look up to, not just Catholics. And I think
this is a moment, I think, in time where if they basically said, we're going to go back to the church as established on the Sermon on the Mount, if they went back to that, which is a dire need of where we are in the world, to basically go back to that, what Christ did back then, they would be a church that would be relevant.